Hey, how's it going everyone? My name is Northerly and welcome back to another video. Today, I'm going to be discussing my overall thoughts on the Halo Infinite campaign now that it's officially out in the wild. I'll be discussing areas of the campaign like story, characters, enemies, gameplay, level design, sandbox, and the open world aspect of Zeta Halo. Now, I'm not going to mention anything particular about what's missing in the Halo Infinite campaign, but more of just what we have at the moment in the game. Some of these things that are missing though is like theater, scoring, and also picking up skulls and stuff and actually be able to hold it. Now this video will contain spoilers, so if you haven't played the main story to Halo Infinite's campaign, I advise you play that first because you do not want this campaign ruined, and then just come back to the video and rewatch it then. Without further ado, let's get in this video. Captain's Report, December 8th, 2021. 6 years. 6 long years. That's how long it took us to get Halo Infinite. After waiting over 6 years and after Halo 5's lackluster campaign, we finally arrived to Zeta Halo to continue Master Chief's epic story and see what's going on in the Halo universe. Halo Infinite picks right up after the events of Halo 5's Legendary ended at the Halo Ring, with the UNSC Infinity being attacked by the Banished in a completely kick-ass cutscene. Now, I will say this is the only cutscene that is pre-rendered, while the rest of the campaign cutscenes are in-game, like Halo 2 or Halo 3, Halo Combat Evolved, like any old trilogy. What I like about this scene is that it shows how powerful Atriox is, but also how vulnerable the Chief can be, even with him being known as various titles like the Hero of Humanity, the Reclaimer, and Demon, but all encircling with the idea of him having extreme strength and capability. This scene also sets up a theme that I kind of picked up throughout the entirety of the campaign that affected our protagonist, and it's the idea of making mistakes, understand vulnerabilities, and that it's all part of being human and then simply moving on afterward. But going back to the story, Infinite sets up the new biggest threats to humanity in the galaxy, the Banished and the Endless. Humanity has just been through a brutal fight with Cortana created, only to pick up a new conflict with the Banished, who are angered at humanity due to their byproduct Cortana in the created. Now the reason for their resentment towards humanity stems mainly back from the scene in Infinite where Cortana and Atriox are having a conversation on where Atriox stands, where he stays loyal to the Banished. In consequence, Cortana accepts his stance, but at the same time, orders the Guardians to completely destroy the homeworld of the Brutes, Doizak. Now, with the Banished and their hellbent revenge on humanity, they seek control of a new Halo ring, Zeta Halo, and they end up doing so with the plan to maybe fire it and wipe out humanity, as well as aid the Harbinger to reawaken the Endless. Chief, once again being the last stand for humanity, plans to reclaim the ring bit by bit with the help of the pilot, who we found out later in the game is named Fernando Esparza, and the AI known as the Weapon. Our three protagonists go through a lot during their adventure in Zeta Halo. The pilot being fearful in what's to come during the continued conflict in the ring and just want to go home to see his family. The Weapon on finding out she's an exact copy of Cortana and scared that she'll eventually turn into the way Cortana did and just repeat her recent event. The Chief, living with the regret of not stopping or negotiating with Cortana in the events of Halo 5 Guardians and her efforts in controlling the galaxy. But like I mentioned with the theme earlier, all these characters eventually come to learn from their mistakes and understand that's being part of human. I guess not so much for the Weapon because she's an AI, but I digress. At the end of the story, the pilot gains the courage and is ready to aid the Chief in the fight against the Banished, and he shows this with excitement and optimism. The Weapon accepts that she is nearly an exact copy of Cortana, but at the same time, she knows she has the power to not be like her. And for the Chief, he understands he's failing stopping Cortana, but has the closure of knowing Cortana halted the Banished efforts by fragmenting the ring and most importantly, giving the Chief the second chance on protecting the Weapon. I think this theme is really important, especially pertaining to the Chief in the events of Halo 5. Even with Halo 5's story being a complete deviation for Cortana's original death from Halo 4, Halo Infinite does a great job on wrapping up her story, and by not only saving the Chief's life during her first death, but making sure that he comes out even stronger after her second death of herself, by giving him the knowledge to do all he can to protect the Weapon. I think we're putting Cortana in the created story to rest by handling it the best way possible. It opens a door for a new and exciting adventure with the fight against the Banished and the Endless. Now, the Banished have two goals in mind: control Zeta Halo and possibly fire it on humanity, and also aid the Harbinger in the return of the Endless. Now, this is where I personally have an issue that comes into play with the story. As of now, the Endless and the Harbinger are pretty much a mystery on who they are and their origins and stuff. I understand that we'll probably find out more down the line with DLC and stuff, and also how 343 wants to keep it as a mystery as of now, but I feel like there could have been more explanation on exactly why are the Banished helping them besides in the effort of controlling a ring. Now, I understand that both the Banished and the Harbinger want to have a fully functioning and repaired ring for the Banished's sake of controlling it, and the Harbinger's sake for repairing the auditorium for being one of the steps to having the Endless reemerge. My question is essentially on what is the Banished's plan after they have a fully operational ring besides having a super weapon point at the head of a galaxy. I can't see that the Banished and Harbinger's shared goal is just to simply wipe out humanity, since the Harbinger specifically told Chief when they first met that they were not enemies.
We are not enemies.
I also wonder what the Harbinger plans to do with the Banished due to the fact they want to be the unipolar power of the galaxy, while at the same time, the Harbinger wants to bring back the Endless to inherit the mantle and also be their own unipolar power as well. And I would assume this would probably create a conflict between the two parties. It's also known that the Banished want to be free of anyone's rule and be their own dominant force in the galaxy, and Heshram says how the Banished won't bow to the Covenant, Prophets, or the Harbinger in the scene where he's at the table. I also wonder with the end credit scene of Aatrox opening a forward door that leads to presumably the Silex of the Endless, what Aatrox's purpose of going to the location the Endless Silex could mean. Is Aatrox just trying to destroy the Silex to thwart the Endless from coming back, or does he have some sort of other plan that he's never fully disclosed with Heshram? At this point, we just could theorize. I think the overall ending for Halo Infinite's main campaign story, it's both satisfying and also does a main job of showing what's to come. As I stated earlier, Infinite wraps up Cortana's life in the best way possible from what Halo 5 set up, and the fight between Heshram and Chief is a great showdown between the two, and is a big halt to the Banished efforts on the ring. The Harbinger's death message to whoever, presumably the Endless, adds to the wonder of what's to come, and Aatrox's survival from the destruction of the Infinity shows that we'll more than likely see him once again. Now, honestly, I had a really good feeling throughout the campaign that Aatrox wasn't truly dead, and also I just thought 343 wouldn't probably pull off another Jewel and Dama stunt, which we've seen in Halo 5, and it just wouldn't make sense because I think it would get a lot of people pissed off. And also knowing from Halo Wars 2 campaign how Aatrox has survived countless suicide missions he was sent on from the Covenant just knows that surviving is in this guy's DNA. Another aspect that I think that ties in greatly to the story is how well the characters are written and how likable they were. Unlike Halo 5, who had some very bland characters and character development, and also just too many characters that the writers probably couldn't focus on flesh out every single character in an effective way, and you had just some characters there. Infinite turns that around and lessens the amount of characters. They're all very unique and go through developmental stages. I already stated some of the hurdles our protagonists go through. On top of that, they're very likable, and they brought the seriousness when needed, and also every once in a while brought that comic relief that we needed. Haven't really seen since like Halo 3 or Halo 3 ODST. I really think the Chief shined in this game, with 343 blending the both one-liner badass Chief from like the original trilogy, and also having the more like Halo 4 and Halo 5-ish Chief moments, with him being more reflective on his past and his dialogue. There's an especially good moment when Chief defeats Heshram in their fight, and Chief literally holds Heshram in his last moment. The pilot is confused by this Heshram as a monster, while the Chief agrees and also understands that Heshram was just a soldier doing what he thought was right. I just thought this was an amazing scene just because the fact, like, yeah, like we would expect the Chief to maybe say something like this, but actually seeing it in game was just kind of like, wow, like, damn, that was just a great scene. Heshram is probably one of my favorite characters in this game besides the Chief, because he's a very intelligent, grizzled, and strong leader of Banished, kind of like Aatrox, but he's just different in his own ways, and also has great dialogue and voice acting. One of my favorite scenes with Heshram is when he's at the announcers table with Tremonis and Diego Ardamni, mainly for the voice acting and also how the scene shows how ruthless he is, even to his own lieutenants, so the vision of Aatrox can be achieved. However, while Heshram was a very good character for me personally, I felt that the Harbinger was unfortunately not as strong as an antagonist as Heshram. Now, I do think her voice acting, the dialogue, and the overall like art style and design was really good, which, even though it being very unique and something we've never seen in the Halo universe as this new faction's kind of coming up, I still think the design just worked really well. But I feel like we should have gotten to like know her a little bit better before just killing her off at the end of the campaign. I do understand she's probably more of a bridge building character, that there probably will be another big bad Endless that we'll have to like face, but compared to Heshram, she's just forgettable by a landslide in my opinion, and just doesn't really have that many of like really memorable moments. However, I will say that she does have some very interesting lines throughout the campaign, especially in the audio logs you could find throughout Zeta Halo. Now, one of her lines that is causing a lot of like, oh my gosh, like moments is when she's talking to the one captured human. She literally says to him, the style of the Gravemind, and same like delivery of I shall talk and you shall listen.
Now I shall talk, and you shall listen.
Now, her character has been starting some really good theories of who or what she is, and the main thought is that she could be precursor or some sort of like variation of a precursor or some sort of byproduct by them. And it's just very refreshing to have a character in faction that creates like a bunch of theorization within the community, and just on a crazy level just has that mystery once again in Halo. Halo Infinite might have the best line of enemies we have ever seen in any Halo game due to their well-designed and unique rules they have. As expected, all enemies play like how you imagine them playing, but I found that a majority of them were very fun to fight, fair to fight, and didn't seem like bullet sponges like Halo 5 did. The dynamic between fighting both elites and brutes for the first time together were also really cool. I enjoyed all the different kind of brute variations between the jump pack brutes, charging brutes, snipers, and chieftains. There were a lot of chieftains. There's only so many of them that it made the gameplay interesting and made the combat just feel really unique. I also think the Sentinels were very fun to fight as well, It was great to see some variation with them as well, like the standard sentinels, also some of the big bubble shields around them, and also the electric sniper sentinels who use the shock rifles. I also think the skimmers are a really new cool enemy as well. I think their overall design, their sound design is just really cool. They are probably some sort of like different variation of like Endless because they are very similar in design. I think their like voice sounds are like really cool. Like the sound of their like little hover wings has just a really cool, unique sound. But I do feel like they were a little bit on the weak side because you could get those instant shot head kills on it. But at the same time, their weird strafing movement kind of added a fun way to the gameplay. They're not like drones in any way. While drones kind of fly all over the place, the skimmers just kind of move back and forth and just create this like cool like strafing movement that just adds a different way to fight. Now the enemies I didn't care to fight were the hunters, and it just seems like there's a universal consensus that they're not the fun enemies to fight. I think the hunters are way too defensive in this game, and probably the most bullet spongy of the enemies, if the only one who's bullet spongy. It's just really hard to get those sneak kills behind them, and their melee attacks just come really quick, while in the original games, like, you would try and, you know, they'll melee you, and maybe if they miss, they'll kind of stop for a minute, you could get behind them and get like a shotgun shot or like whatever on them. But this game, it's just kind of hard to do that. However, I will say their banished red art style and their sound design is so good and probably the best I've ever heard in the series. Beyond the actual gameplay experience, I think the enemies sounded and looked fantastic as well. The elites looked and sounded like elites again, rather than the weird, brutish hybrid voices they had in Halo 4 and 5. Well, I mean, like, literally Halo 4, they sound like brutes at the same time they spoke in Sangheili. Cool, but at the same time, didn't sound the most elitish. I also loved how the Elite's armor were also very similar to like the design of Halo Reach concept art done by Isaac Hannaford, and you can especially see this within the shoulder pieces the Elites wear. The Grunts also have probably some of the funniest dialogue I've ever heard in a Halo game, and you can pick this up actually a lot at the Banished Propaganda Towers. So I'll tell you a little story. I was actually exploring a Banished Propaganda Tower, and a Grunt told me over the waves that 3 cloaked elites were behind me, and I just happened to look. He tricked me, laughed at me, and then proceeded to ask me if I needed a sidekick. I do have some gameplay of this, but I can't use it because I actually have some friends talking in the background from when I was capturing the footage, so you couldn't hear it exactly, but it's still really good. Just maybe sit by a banished tower or two and just try and listen for this certain like line. While the base enemies were very fun to fight in this game, the bosses also were a very pleasant surprise, and also safe to say the best bosses we've ever seen in Halo. Halo has had several attempts in its lifetime at doing boss fights. This can be seen like taking out the Heretic leader in Halo 2, or taking a couple shots of the Spartan laser at 343 Guilty Spark, or Bullet Sponge Warren Eternal, who was just a flat-out unfun and boring character to fight, and even being the Prophet of Regret in his modified chair. Although these boss fights were all unique in their own right, they were all to say decent or bad. While Infinite takes all these unique elements into account, but they also implement it so they're also really fun to fight the bosses. The bosses in this game are actually done like proper bosses because they all have their unique personalities. It reflects on their combat style. For example, Yiga, our Dom Knight, is a silent killer and uses his active camo, creeps around the play space, making you have to use a threat sensor as a tool to spot him. While Eshram, he depends on his shields, and they are powered by reactors that are located around the walls of the House of Reknin. You gotta shoot them, and once the shields were actually gone because the reactors were destroyed, he went into a more brutalistic, no pun intended, relied on charging with his modified gravity hammer. I think it's worth mentioning, even though I love his character in the voice acting, Bassus is a little on the overpowered side and could use a little nerf, because he's pretty tricky for a mid-game boss compared to the rest of the bosses, and yeah, I can only imagine that on Legendary. Also, a really cool feature about the bosses is once you finally defeat a boss, you can actually pick up their modified weapons and use them yourself. So for example, Eshram wields a more powerful gravity hammer that has a red energy blade and pretty much as an axe on the opposite side of the hammerhead. I'm hoping these current variants of these weapons also means we'll get them in the multiplayer, because they're probably in the, I mean, they're definitely in the game files, and that could mean we could get Super Fiesta as well, which done greatly in Halo 5. Also within the world, there's also special target enemies the player can take out if they want to, and these special targets act as their own little boss fights as well. While these targets do play slightly better than the standard enemies, they all have special variants of weapons, and also within the intel database, they have their own target IDs that provide a decent amount of lore and intel in them. I think this is a great way for these characters to feel like more like mini bosses and more than just like a character with a special name that just kind of hovers over them, and it gives just more personality to them and also a sense of achievement in taking them out. While in the realm of weapons and enemy gameplay, I feel like this is a good time to discuss weapons, vehicles, and equipment and how they all play in the campaign. Now, this is a part where I personally have some issues that come into play, but nothing too bad to say at the very least. Now, I think the weapon sandbox we have in Halo Infinite is a very solid lineup, and they're all very fun to use in their most part. The downside of the weapons sandbox, it just feels very lacking at some point, and I feel like some roles are missing that we have that are empty in both the campaign and multiplayer. I feel like the lack of weapons like the carbine, the SMG, and the OGE shotgun fuel rod, and just tons of more just makes us want more in the sandbox. So for example, without the OG shotgun, there's no counter to the energy sword, and there's really no effective one way to get that bull true or one-shot kill. And this makes me kind of nervous on how this will play out for even multiplayer, for infection, because I don't think the bulldogs will be a viable weapon for killing infected. I'm not saying every weapon has to have a counter, but this is one of those classic combos in the series that we've had in every game until now. And like I said, I just don't think the bulldog just plays that role. Now it does look we'll probably get some of these weapons down Halo Infinite's life cycle due to its live service nature from developer discussion, but I really hope if these weapons do come that they can also get patched in the campaign that doesn't break it, but also at the same time just has a more fun and more replay value to the campaign, just has some different gameplay encounter. Now the weapons that we do have are very fun, and I think some of these weapons that are very fun are the dual function weapons like the Heat Wave, the Cinder Shot, and also the Return of the Hydra. The Cinder Shot is a blast to guide the shots and taking out enemies in new creative ways, and just some ways the weapons can never do. As of now, my favorite weapons to use in the campaign are the Cinder Shot, the Mangler, sorry for not being sorry for liking it, it's just too satisfying to use, the Sentinel Beam, and also the Shock Rifle. Also, the addition to throw fusion coils at enemies and just call them noob cubes, probably one of the most fun things I've seen in the Halo sandbox in a long time. And also the different variations of them just add a different fun element to them. Like I say, nothing feels more satisfying is when you shoot a group of fusion coils to cause a huge chain reaction that just ends up taking a bunch of banished troops out. Now, one part of this game that I do feel is a major letdown is the vehicle sandbox, how weak it feels and just very lacking. Now right now I absolutely do love the Razorback and loading up with Marines and doing drive-bys to the Banish and saving more Marines from imprisonment. I mean, it really gives me Halo 3 vibes of being a trip hog and drive around the Ark. It just makes the battles feel so much more immersive. However, I do feel like a handful of vehicles are very weak and just useless, to be honest. I mean, for example, the Banshee in this game is literally the most useless iteration, I'll say. I mean, it hurts me to say it because I love the Banshee, but very weak in terms of health, and I think personally it's just kind of awkward to operate. Every time I go for a fuel rod kill of enemy infantry in campaign or multiplayer, but I guess pertaining to campaign mostly here, I just get a shit ton of shots on me, and before I know it, I'm already going to Doomsday mode. And the chopper also feels just very awkward to use because you can't use it without flipping it at some point, and just the awkwardness just seems to affect the enemies who operate as well, which is funny, but kind of just sucks because it was a very fun vehicle to use in Halo 3. And yeah, it flipped here and there, but this game, it's just constantly flipping, and there's just really no good reason to use it. One big thing I'm not seeing a whole lot of people talk about is the fact that there's literally no new vehicles in this game. Yeah, you could say the Razorback is new, but it's just another adaptation of the Warthog that we've kind of seen similar versions of it in the past. The Chopper is just a returning vehicle, and the special energy blade one that Hyperius uses in the level doesn't really add anything new either because it's just a special variation that has some cool looking energy blades that just does a little bit better splatter damage. For me personally, new vehicles has always been kind of one of those things I've looked forward to in every Halo game, and it just sucks to see nothing. Even with Halo 5, we didn't get a whole lot of new vehicles like the Phaeton and the Wasp, but still, it was just still great to see new vehicles. I even remember in one of the Inside Infinite articles where the devs were talking about vehicles and then asked what's their favorite vehicle to use in the campaign. I remember one of them said that one of the new vehicles we haven't seen yet is his favorite vehicle. Well, where is it? I remember when Mega Bloks released a new Infinite set, and it was the Banished Skiff is labeled as a non-playable vehicle that is in the campaign. And this set I actually have in my room, and it sits there, and every time I look at it, I just kind of feel just slightly disappointed because we've never seen this thing, even as a point, it's just a non-playable vehicle. I mean, this thing looks so cool. It looks like a Halo 2 Covenant Shadow and a Brute Prowler combined. Luckily, the YouTuber GameCheat14 has found a somewhat functioning version of this in the files, and it's also untextured. It's just gray and looks almost just a blobbed version of this, but hopefully this does mean it will make some debut at some point, and also that it's drivable too. Just a quick update. So I was actually exploring on Zeta Halo with a couple Marines, and I actually came across the carcass of a Banished skiff. This thing's actually pretty big in size, even in game, and even though this thing's beat up, but it just shows how decent size it is compared to me, some Marines, and also a Razorback that I was driving around, and the detail looks pretty much the same exact way as the set that they have, and also very similar to the gray version that GameCheat14 found. And I just hope with this even carcass being in the campaign that there's further incentives to put this in Infinite's life cycle down the line. And hopefully with Infinite's live service nature, we can actually get some of these vehicles down the line like the Skiff, and also the return of some fan favorites like the Falcon or even the legendary Halo 2 Spectre. The return of equipment also brings a very fun aspect to the campaign once again, especially with the grapple shot, but unfortunately the grapple is pretty much the only dominant piece of equipment that is used. I mean, I personally think that problem leads to the lack of use of other equipment is for players that use controller, which I did. did, and the UI for changing the equipment, and I think it's just kind of bad and just not the most efficient. Problem is that it takes focus away from the actual combat because you have to do a left click on the D-pad and then look at direction what piece of equipment you want to use. It's just a very slow process and annoying because if I want to use something like a thruster in a hunter fight and then switch to a grapple shot, I'd have to almost stop in mid-combat or just kind of move awkwardly around during the combat. It just feels very unnatural. It doesn't have that like good like flow to it. And it doesn't seem like a bad process to do like when you write it down on paper, but once you translate to actual gameplay, it just doesn't work the best. It definitely probably works better on keyboard and mouse, which I would have to try sometime another playthrough the campaign. Hopefully 343 can look at ways to improve this, and this also does affect the grenades in a similar way with kind of just clicking in one direction the D-pad. And beyond that complaint, the grapple shot is great for traversing around the map, and items like the threat sensor prove vital in fighting a cloaked boss like Chaklock or Yiga or Domnai. I'm also hoping 343 does add some neutral equipment in the future of Halo just to add some mix up in the combat loop. Hopefully it could be added in the campaign easily as well. I also like the equipment upgrade system as well, because it didn't feel like a grindy system to upgrade pieces of equipment, and the upgrades were simple enough and straightforward to understand without feeling so meticulous like some games. I think looking for Spartan cores is a nice way just to upgrade your Spartan and Master Chief throughout the Halo campaign, and the whole upgrade system just kind of felt like the Doom 2016 upgrade system, which I thought was really good. Now, the biggest game changer for Halo Infinite's campaign has been the open world aspect of it. Halo has always been a linear focused series, with some games focusing on larger level design like Halo Combat Evolved and Halo 3, while Halo 2 and Halo 5 focus on more of a linear style level design. We saw Halo's first experimentation with an open world aspect in Halo 3 ODST, but still this was a level by level game, which I mean like you start up a level and then you go to maybe like the Mombasa Streets level, which you can roam around as a rookie. And they were very large environments, but at the same time weren't truly an open world experience. Now, Infinite is the first Halo game to have a totally open world that allows the player to freely choose on what they want to do and the pace they want to go at. And after finishing the story and exploring Zeta Halo, even right now because I'm trying to 100% it, I can personally say that I think 343 did a really good job of creating this world. With that being said though, there are still a few things that aren't great about the open world aspect. They're not to the point that like it ruins the experience at all, but just, you know, it would be kind of nice if they were there. Something that I thought while I was playing the Halo campaign is that I feel that there's always something to do on Zeta Halo, even if it's mindlessly exploring the ring. Beyond in the main missions, there's plenty to do, like taking out targeted banished officers, looking for Spartan cores, audio logs, armor lockers, freeing up forward operating bases, which are nicknamed FOBs, and raiding banished camps, and much, much more. I feel like even with completing the main story, there's still tons to learn, like what's actually going on during the fight in the ring, raiding a banished munition station, and understand the purpose of that and how important it's played during the role of the fight. Even though we can't explore the ring in its entirety, the environment that's available for us is still very large, and 343's messages that they were saying during the Inside Infinite articles of if you see it you can go there are still very relevant. The Pacific Northwest inspired environment of Zeta is very pleasing and gives the same vibes as the second mission of Halo on Combat Evolved, but on a much larger scale. The problem with this is that it's the only setting we have in the open world the majority of the time, with the exception of some banished and foreign environments here and there. The lack of biodiversity also didn't bother me. I know for some people it made them upset, but I was hoping to see at least some stuff if we did have a lack of biodiversity, like, you know, weather effects like rain or snow. But hopefully these aspects can be patched into the campaign in the future, if not too difficult. I'm also hoping with the campaign ending with the Chief and the weapon being in the desert on the other side of the ring means we will eventually get some new settings in the future with campaign expansion. Now, the Forerunner structures and environments in this campaign, oh my god, they are so on point. I mean, some of the details of the Forerunner doors, of how mechanical intricate are just so interesting to watch, and just see them slowly opening up all these like different parts of them working, and also like seeing the arrows on the floor of the hallways that show you what direction you're going, like Halo Combat Evolved did with the Forerunner buildings. It's so refreshing to see again. All these callbacks is just great. I mean, there's so many little and big things to talk about the Forerunner art style. It could be talked about for such a long time. Just when you play Halo Infinite, just take a moment and just look at some of the details in these Forerunner environments, and then may like think about the old Halo games. The main missions also take advantage of both the open world and the linear level design, but still slightly favors, in my opinion, the linear level approach to keep players engaged and focused. The linear levels do play well. The unfortunate part, they do take place in Forerunner settings, which gets slightly boring. The combat and the narrative helps from keeping these settings being a little bit redundant. Some of the best linear levels that I personally feel was the first Gabrakan warship, and also the House of Reckoning. The Bracken warship has a very fun part at the end of the level where you're kind of running through the ship after once starting to detonate it, and you have to grapple through a bunch of fallen like base pieces that are fallen inside the ship, and it just feels like a very Spider-Man / Master Chief moment. Going up from floor to floor in the House of Reckoning and fighting in makeshift UNSC bases, which is just very interesting just to see how the bandits are just like that into like the UNSC fight style. It was just worth it the whole time, and just that lead up to both the fights of Jaeger, Ardamnai, and Eshram was so good. On the other hand, the open world levels felt really good, and they felt like glorified missions of the mission Halo from Halo Combat Evolved, which obviously was the big inspiration for this game. I mean, they've said that in the past, but it just, once you play the Halo campaign, you kind of realize how much inspiration that level had in this game. And I feel like these open world aspects is where the game truly shines the best, in my opinion. The player has more choice in how they want to approach these levels. They can do it on foot, a vehicle, or do a surprise attack by grappling over a wall and then go guns ablaze. Unfortunately, stealth isn't really a viable option in this game, because once you kill one enemies, it just seems like all the enemies go on high alert and they already know you're engaging with them, even though you silently killed a jackal, you know, on the side of a base. But with talking about levels, there is a major problem that is present, but thankfully 343 does plan to fix this, but it's the fact that players can't pick a certain level that they want to play if they want to replay a level. For example, if I want to replay the level of fighting Chaklock in the tower, I would literally have to start a completely new campaign save and then play until I get to that level. It's good that 343 is aware of this problem and plan on fixing it. I hope that they do, they can somehow twine this feature of replay through the 4 operating bases. That's why I personally see the best way, but I'm no game developer, so just, you know, take that with a grain of salt. Also, on a side note, I also thought the overall game performance was pretty well. I mean, I was playing on a pretty beefed up laptop, and I wasn't really like running into many bugs or anything like that. I did have one instance though, and a phantom got stuck in a man cannon and just kind of sitting there. The brutes didn't really know what to do, and they just kind of continued fighting me. It was pretty funny. I haven't really seen anything like that bad like since, but like it wasn't like game breaking, just a phantom just kind of stuck in a man cannon. With Halo Infinite's campaign also showing that we'll probably get some expansion in the future, I hope aspects of like seeing the map change throughout the time can be something we'll see, and hopefully we'll also see some new environments also happen in the future, like a desert or maybe jungle or winter biome, who knows. After playing Halo Infinite's campaign and reprocessing some of my thoughts while making this video, I can say with confidence that this is 343's best Halo campaign, and probably the best Halo campaign since Halo 3. Halo Infinite has a satisfactory story with great characters who go through important story arc, and has an ending that leaves us wanting more and also a sense of achievement at the same time. The story is even more exciting because we'll probably get expansion in the future, like I said, and if it's free or I have to pay some money for it, I'll do it because I'm ready to play more of this campaign. The AI in this game are also very fun and fair to fight as well. There's a lot of variety in them, and for the most part, it makes the combat fun. Hopefully 343 can rework the hunters a bit, and by making them more fun to fight, I think this could mean Halo Infinite might have one of the best lineup of enemy AI to fight in terms of variety and gameplay. The boss fights in this game are also undoubtedly the best boss fights we've ever seen in Halo. I mean, the fights have cool lead-ups and introductions to the characters. They also have interesting personalities, interesting aspects while fighting them, and some bosses also have specialized weapons that they drop once defeated. Infinite's weapon sandbox is also a great return to form, to seeing weapons have their unique rules and being more than just different looking weapons that just kill the enemies like Halo 5 did. And I mean by that, like the light rifle, the DMR, and the battle rifle, and the carbine. Long range weapons in Halo 5 that just kind of did the same thing at the end of the day. The only problem I have with the sandbox is just, like I said, it feels very small, and I feel like some of those like dynamic like weapon combo rolls, like the shotgun and energy sword, isn't really there. And hoping with Infinite being a live service game, we can see more weapons implemented in both the campaign and multiplayer. The vehicles are definitely the most weakest aspect of the sandbox, and due to vehicles like the Banshee and the Chopper having issues of maneuverability and just the Banshee's armor just feeling like tinfoil, it only adds a few viable options while playing the campaign. Also for me personally, just seeing no new true vehicles return to the campaign is just kind of a disappointment, and just also just adds more to that lack of variety in the vehicle sandbox. However, I will say the Razorback is still a great addition to the sandbox and is great for some road trips for some Marines. The return of equipment is awesome, and the grapple shot is definitely probably one of the best aspects we've seen to the Halo sandbox, and hopefully 343 can add just some more like variety to the equipment sandbox by seeing some neutral equipment like the bubble shield or the gravity lift. The world of Zeta Halo is also amazing. 343 crafted a world that feels alive and expansive. The overall world doesn't feel too big or overwhelming, but it feels like the ultimate version of the level Halo from Combat Evolved. There's also plenty to do on the Halo ring with the main objectives, the side objectives, Easter eggs and the collectibles and stuff to find. The only problem with Zeta Halo is the lack of biodiversity and weather. It's not the biggest deal since the gameplay and the narrative are very strong, like I said, but hopefully with more campaign expansions, we get more places to explore in the future. The level design in this game also feels very good, a healthy mix between the open world elements and the linear levels. The linear levels bring more of the classic Halo vibes, while the new open world levels that 343 made really shine, just really give that Zeta Halo feel, and just really makes it feel like a real battle. Like I said, one downside of the level and it's just the fact you can't replay certain missions, but hopefully when 343 implements it, it could be done quickly. So this brings us where I think the campaign ranks in the Halo series. I'm not going to give it a letter, a number, grade, even though if I would give a number, I would give it a 9 out of 10. A lot of big gaming names like Game Informer and IGN are given that same rank, but I definitely feel like this is one of the top Halo campaigns. As of right now, my favorite Halo campaigns are first Halo 2, just due to the characters and the story of that game, being like on the different side, like the Arbiter's standpoint, and then Halo 3 is my second favorite Halo campaign, just for finishing the fight of the original Halo trilogy. Halo Infinite for me right now is my third favorite Halo campaign, due to the story, the characters, the awesome world of Zeta Halo, but the main reason is simply that they blend all these elements together and make it feel like a true return to form for Halo. This true Halo feeling, I think, has been absent in the time for a series for a long time, and I haven't really felt this feeling since like Halo Reach and playing that campaign. It just feels great to play this new campaign and just feel like invigorated and just have so much fun playing it. I am very happy with the campaign that 343 crafted, and I can't wait to see what's next in the Halo Infinite campaign and this 10-year plan for Halo Infinite. So with that all being said, what do you guys think of Halo Infinite's campaign? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you kind of similar reviews as me? Just leave your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to see what you guys have to say. I do plan to do a multiplayer review some point after this, and there's going to be definitely a lot to talk about, and I just felt like with the two kind of being almost like separate entities, I just kind of want to talk about one aspect at a time. So that's all I have to say, guys. Thank you for tuning this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Have yourself a fantastic day.